Ernest Shackleton was on 4 Antarctic expeditions, but only one was successful. This was the Nimrod expedition in 1907, which had the goal of reaching the South Pole. Even though they did not reach the South Pole, Ernest Shackleton and 3 other men widened Antarctic frontiers by traversing farther south than any other expeditions had before them, and changed history by mapping the route they used, which was then utilized by more Antarctic explorers in the future. Ernest Shackleton was born February 15, 1874, in Kilkee, County Kildare, Ireland, and was the second out of 10 children in his family. His father, Henry Shackleton, and mother, Henrietta Letitia Sophia Shackleton, had decided to move to Sydenham, a town near London, after a potato famine had hit their farm. Shackleton had been 10 at the time. Shackleton then went to Dulwich College for 3 years and left when he was 16 to join the Merchant Navy. The voyages he did there brought him all over the southern hemisphere. He passed his test to become his second mate at the age of 20, and 4 years later he earned his master's certificate. During the Second Boer War in 1899, he got a job taking troops from England to South Africa. It is suspected that Ernest Shackleton had a congenital heart defect and was a heavy drinker. Over the years, it took a toll on his health. In 1901, Ernest Shackleton joined the British Antarctic expedition as a 3rd lieutenant. The expedition was led by Captain Robert Falcon Scott. In order to secure a spot in the Antarctic expedition, Shackleton had reached out to an old friend, who happened to be the son of the expedition's funder. The expedition mostly took place on the Ross Ice Shelf. During this expedition, Ernest Shackleton was given the task of finding the density of ice and water samples, and taking care of the food stores on the ship. Once they reached Antarctica, they mostly ate the region's native animals, like fish and seals. Shackleton took on the task of killing such animals. Also during this expedition, Shackleton, Captain Scott, and Dr. Edward Wilson reached furthest south and only 500 miles from the South Pole by sledging over the Ross Ice Shelf. But they could not go any further because they all had scurvy, a common disease for sailors at the time. Shackleton was coughing up blood and had to be sent home on a relief ship. After his return and recovery, Shackleton became famous because of the expedition's success, and was made the secretary of the Royal Scottish Geographical Society in 1904. Not long after, in that same year, he got married to Emily Mary Doman. With his success, Ernest Shackleton started thinking about the future and the expeditions to come. In 1908, Ernest Shackleton ran an expedition with the goal of reaching the South Pole. Unfortunately, Shackleton and the party had to stop at only 97 miles away due to a lack of food. At one point, they had to eat only 2 biscuits a day, one for breakfast and one for dinner. Shackleton and a man named Frank Wild had to do the last part of their journey back to camp by themselves, barely making it back in time to start a signal fire to alert their departing ship, and make sure it wouldn't leave without them or the other men in need of rescue. There were 2 other parties on this expedition. One made to the top of Mount Everest, the second tallest volcano in Antarctica, and the other reached the magnetic South Pole. Upon return in 1909, every man on the expedition got a polar medal. Shackleton was knighted and made commander of the Royal Victorian Order. He also got 20,000 pounds and wrote a book about the expedition in order to pay off its debts. On August 1st, 1914, Shackleton's ship for the Transantarctic Expedition, more commonly known as the Endurance Expedition, set out southward with the goal of crossing the whole continent of Antarctica. By March, it had been there so long that Shackleton ordered the ship's engines to be shut down. They ended up getting a leak, and with ocean water coming in, Shackleton ordered them to abandon ship and make camp. On November 21st, 1915, the Endurance ship sank. Shackleton, who was on watch at the time, called out, "She's going, boys!" Then, on January 13th, 1916, the dogs were shot, killed, and eaten, only as a last measure to survive. On April 1st, 1916, they made their way to Elephant Island. After a 4-day journey, they landed on the island. Knowing that they had to self-rescue, a few days later, a 6-man crew set out for South Georgia Island on the James Kidd, in for a 16-day journey across the open ocean. On May 18th, 1916, a few days after landing, on South Georgia Island, they started a trek across the never-before-crossed uncharted mountains, where at one point they had to go sledding down a mountainside. Once they reached the whaling station, they started sending rescue expeditions back to Elephant Island. One of them made it to the island on August 1st, 1916. Every single man survived. Upon returning to England, World War I was still raging. Shackleton signed up and was sent to Russia. Once the war was over, Shackleton turned his objectives back to the Arctic and started planning to go to the North Pole, because if he traveled there, it would be the first recorded trip. However, since he and the new Prime Minister had different goals, Shackleton changed direction and was sent to Antarctica. On September 24th, 1921, the Quest expedition set off toward Antarctica with the goal of circumnavigating the continent. On the way to South Georgia, Shackleton had a near-lethal heart attack. A few months later, on January 4th, 1922, the same day that they arrived on the island, Ernest Shackleton had another heart attack. Unfortunately, this one was fatal. Ernest Shackleton changed history by charting a route used by many explorers after him, and he is even affecting us now. Not that long ago, there was an expedition launched to find the sunken Endurance ship, and he changed Antarctic exploration as we know it by using his incredible stamina to make it so close to the South Pole, which inspired others to make it there, changing history in itself. In conclusion, Ernest Shackleton was one of the greatest Antarctic explorers of his time, even though he only reached one of the goals of his 3 expeditions. That was overshadowed by his will to stay alive and not give up in the most dire of situations. As another explorer once said, "For scientific discovery, give him Scott. For speed and efficiency of travel, give me Amundsen. But when disaster strikes and all hope is gone, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton." Shackleton made his mark on history. Now get out and make yours.